Welcome to the Podcast for Inquiry, brought to you by the Centre for Inquiry Canada, a national educational charity supporting your community for reason, compassion, and secular humanist values. You have answers, we have questions. I'm your host, Leslie Rosenblood, board member and secular chair for CFIC. Welcome. Kat McLeod is my guest on Podcast for Inquiry today. She hails from Edmonton, Alberta. Kat is passionate about dispelling misinformation, especially regarding herbal remedies. Kat works at the University of Alberta, where she also volunteers as a mentor for pharmacy and medical students. Coping with the consequences of taking herbal supplements has given her a unique perspective that she shares with the next generation of healthcare professionals, arming them with the knowledge that can hopefully prevent the kind of suffering she has endured. She has been generous enough to share that knowledge with us today. Kat and I talk about some of the problems in Canada and elsewhere with standard medical practice before delving into her personal experience with the severe detrimental effects of a potent steroid in an herbal supplement that was not listed as an ingredient. We also discuss other aspects of the alt-med industry and steps that Canada can take to improve the safety and well-being of all Canadians. I bring you my conversation with Kat McLeod. Kat McLeod, thank you for taking the time and speaking with me today on Podcast for Inquiry.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is going to be, I think, an interesting conversation. I've got a lot to learn from you because this is an area, this is actually true for a lot of our episodes. It's something that I don't know a lot about. So going to be depending on your expertise. And what we're going to be talking about today is the alternative medicine industry, because it's not just about healthcare, but it's also a multi-billion-dollar business right here in Canada, and of course much larger in other countries with larger economies. And from what I understand, Kat, you're not a fan. Is that a fair assessment?
That's the understatement of the century.
Okay. So I'd like to explore that a little bit more because there are, I think, many valid criticisms and quite significant shortcomings in our standard medical practices right here in Canada. They leave a lot. They leave a lot to be desired. They can be significantly improved, and there are actually a lot of harms done because of things that we don't do or that we do poorly. And so if there are other industries or other practitioners that want to fill in the gaps, at least in principle, that might not be such a terrible thing. So, if the alternative medicine industry is not your favorite, and that's a considerable understatement, help me understand why that's the case, please.
Well, and just to tag on to what you were saying, in my province, I'm from Alberta. The UCP government is actually trying to push people towards alt-med, because our medical system is sort of crippled at the moment. We don't have enough doctors and nurses and hospital beds to go around. So they're trying to push everybody off to the alt-med, not realizing the dangers of it. So I can give you my perspective of what happened to me.
Sure. Well, yeah, but we'll get to that. I promise.
Sure.
But just broadly speaking, I mean, if the government is saying, we are overburdened, we don't have enough of staff, we don't have enough facilities. I'm just paraphrasing what you're saying, and we've got these other practitioners that might be able to fill the gaps. You just said that that's dangerous. So why? Okay. So again, why? Just enlighten me.
Sure. I will. I mean, I can talk about all the different variations of alt-med, from like chiropractic, homeopathy. My specialty is the herbal preparations and herbal remedies. All of them come with dangers, and most of those dangers are not well known. They're not well talked about, and the alternative medicine proponents like to minimize the risks as much as possible. They try and sort of muffle anyone who speaks out against them. And that becomes very dangerous. So, for example, with herbal preparations, There are several ones that are very well known, like St. John's wort. You've heard of it.
I have. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what it does, but I've heard of it.
It treats a number of different ailments like depression and things like that. But what people don't realize is that it has more drug interactions than any other herbal preparation on the market. Care to guess
So
how many?
when you say drug interactions, what does that mean?
Well, with St. John's wort, what it tends to do is it changes the way your liver processes medications. And so it can actually decrease the efficacy of the medication that you're taking, or it can increase the side effects of the medication that you're taking.
Oh, so it's not just its own thing, but if you're taking anything else, it changes how that other drug works. So it's not just a side effect from St. John's wort. It's
the interaction.
It interacts significantly with a whole bunch of other things, hence interactions. I see.
Yes.
Okay.
It's just like when you are taking antihistamines, you shouldn't also eat grapefruit or drink grapefruit juice because there's an interaction that happens when you do that. And if you read the antihistamine packaging, it does tell you about that. Lots of people don't read it, but yeah, St. John's wort. Have a guess at how many drug interactions there could be.
Well, there could be. It's going to have to be a high number because of the way you've introduced that. So I'm going to go with a high number and say 50.
More than that.
Okay.
595 different drugs, from antibiotics, birth control pills, antidepressants, anticoagulants, all kinds of different drugs it interacts with.
So those are some of the most commonly taken prescriptions that people take. Like there's probably, I don't know the stats, but there's probably a majority of Canadians that are taking at least one of those.
Yeah. It even can interact with some painkillers, even Tylenol.
Wow. Okay. So now, so if you're taking anything else, any other medicine, don't take St. John's wort. But for those number of people that aren't on anything else, does it work?
There haven't been any strong studies that prove its efficacy, but it has been linked to liver toxicity.
Right. So it might help with your depression, and it also might give you cirrhosis.
Right.
Okay, that's...
and it might not help with your depression. It might just cause your liver to fail. So,
of all the ways to end one's depression, liver failure is one of the least desirable outcomes, I would say.
Although effective, not recommended.
Yeah. Okay. So that's with one of the things that one of the criticisms that I've heard about alternative medicines is one of dosage. Like back in several centuries ago, I think it was in the 17th century, Paracelsus had a pithy line that said, "The dose makes the poison." So almost anything can be beneficial or at least harmless in small doses and toxic in large enough doses. And part of what makes medicine effective is giving the right dose to the right person at the right time. And one of the main criticisms I've heard about from the non-regulated herbal or supplement industries is that the doses are not... You don't know how much you're taking. You might take 1 pill a day or 2 pills a day, but how much of the active ingredient is actually in each pill can vary widely from box to box, and sometimes, depending on the quality control of the individual manufacturer, from pill to pill within the same container.
Absolutely.
Is this an this is all hearsay? But is that an accurate critique that I've heard, or has? I mean, I imagine that might require a little bit of an investment on the behalf of the supplement makers, but it seems to me that'd be a fairly easy criticism to address. Have any of them done so, or is that still a wild card when you take a supplement?
It is very much a wild card, and most of the supplements that we get are not made in Canada. And the ones that are made in Canada, there's not enough Health Canada inspectors to go and ensure that good manufacturing processes, proper quality control, all those things are actually being adhered to. And there was one instance with Jameson where they were selling Siberian ginseng, only they never tested the actual product itself. And it turns out that even though Jameson is awesome, they have great manufacturing, they have great labeling, super clean facilities. They never tested
They're like
they're
the
huge.
vitamin.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just think of them. They're like, if you want vitamins, there's Jameson, and then there's a tiny bit on the shelf that's everything else.
Yeah. Well, they never tested the actual plant that they were using, and it turns out that it's a plant that looks like Siberian ginseng that's actually toxic to humans if taken in large quantities. Wasn't ginseng at all. So even they can make mistakes. So
okay, all right, but all right, but you said that like Jameson is awesome and they've got great manufacturing facilities. I mean, there are bad batches of everything. Like I just heard that Tesla is recalling its Cybertrucks because of a faulty, I think it's their gas pedal design is bad. So they really need to recall those. There's been dozens of other major car recalls. It seems like every month or two I read about a salmonella or E. coli contamination in something or other. So I don't see any reason why the health or the alternative health industry would be immune to these sorts of things. But is it worse? I mean, okay, Jameson. To give them the credit, or sorry, yes, to give them the benefit of the doubt, they must have felt very chagrined. When they found out, did they behave responsibly, do a recall, and then and substitute actual ginseng in bottles that are labeled Siberian ginseng? I guess what I'm asking is, are problems like that rife, or is the situation that you just described the exception, which also is unfortunately a fact of life in just about every other consumer industry?
I definitely think that they're underreported cases. I think with Jameson, there wasn't a recall that was necessarily done. There was a TV show that did an expose on them, and that's how it was discovered. And I'm sure they probably stopped production and fixed it because they're Jameson. But the vast, like 60 to 80% of all the natural health products in the market are from Asia. And most of those products are not tested when they enter the Canadian market to ensure that good manufacturing processes have been adhered to.
So I started this by asking about the dose, but in fact,
it gets.
In fact, you don't know. No matter what it says on the label, you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, and that's how I got burned.
All right. Well, I promised we'd come back to that. So, how did you get burned? And because this is not so far, we've just been talking sort of in broad strokes, but this is personal for you, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
All right.
I'll give you the abridged version, the short little version, and feel free to ask questions or interrupt me. And, I'll give you all the detail that you want, but really we don't want to bore people. So when I was young, I was like 19 years old. I ended up seeing a herbalist who was the biggest herbalist in Edmonton at the time. And I was referred to him by a friend of the family who'd been seeing him for 10 years. And I went for my asthma. I thought this would be awesome. And it ended up almost costing me my life and ruining my health because the herb that I was taking initially, and then I ended up taking a lot more herbs as I got sicker, had a hidden ingredient that was not listed in the packaging. And it was acting like it was cow gallstones.
Sorry, say that again?
Yeah.
Cow
gallstones.
Okay, so is this an accidental addition to the herb? This was, they So they
Yeah.
deliberately added cow gallstones to what they described as an herbal supplement.
Yes, because
And
it
I'm
acted like a
guessing that
steroid.
and cow gallstones act like steroids. Okay, I was about to
Yeah.
say, what do they do?
What do they do?
I, uh, I don't know what effect a cow gallstone would have on a person, but you
I
do now.
didn't know either.
Yes, fair enough. All right. So what effect what effect does a cow gallstone have on the human body when ingested?
Well, I was taking 9 capsules a day, and the cow gallstones were acting like a corticosteroid 12 times more potent than prednisone. And so I was, in effect, taking the equivalent of 108 prednisone a day, which nearly killed me.
I mean, I've heard of prednisone. I don't know what it does, but I imagine taking 100 times plus a regular dose of it would be bad.
Yeah. Normally,
Okay, so so,
yeah,
so
if you're on prednisone, you're usually on like maybe 1 tab a day, and then they'll wean you off of it to like half a tab, then a quarter of a tab, then a quarter of a tab every other day. Never
okay, so
108.
yeah, all right. So in those cases where you're supposed where you're supposed to take prednisone, like why do people take it, and what effect does it have on the body? Like what's wrong with someone that the prednisone helps fix on a temporary basis?
Well, the corticosteroids, prednisone's just one of them in the family. They're incredibly effective. You may be on it to reduce inflammation. You could be on it because you're going through cancer treatment. You could have gone through an organ transplant. And so you have to be on high dose steroids for a short period of time.
Okay,
And
so it's got a number of quite valid uses,
yeah, it's
but
an amazing drug when used properly.
right. But again, you are on 100 times the standard dosage when someone's on a treatment program.
Yeah.
Okay, so what effects did this herbal treatment have on you before? I'm assuming you weren't aware of this of the cow gallstones at first.
No, and I've always been skeptical. So I
Okay,
read up on everything that I was taking and how they might interact with each other because I wanted to make sure that I was being safe.
so what
How
were you
ironic.
taking? What herbs did you think you were taking?
It was called, well, it's still called Asmawan or Tricopect is the other name
Okay,
for it. It is still on the market. You can just Google it. It'll come up. And it worked like amazing for my asthma. I could
hmm
breathe. I had no troubles. I was working out 2 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was fantastic, but I was gaining a lot of weight and I had issues moving my head and I was getting all these weird bruises and scars on my body. And so I
that's
went through
alarming.
5.5 months of tests, just horrible tests, and seeing a litany of doctors to try and figure out what was going on before we figured out that it was linked to the herbs.
Okay,
So,
and then when you found out that it was linked to the herbs, you must have studied. Someone must have done a chemical analysis of what you were taking, because if it wasn't listed on the box, how would you know that? Like, how did you find out that what you thought was an herbal supplement, in fact, in addition to whatever else was in there, had?
right.
This is funny. I'm sorry. It seems funny every time I say it, but how did you find out that your herbal supplements included this massive dose of cow gallstones?
Well, one of my doctors, my endocrinologist, was having lunch with a pediatrics doctor. And they were talking about their unique cases. And the peds doctor had 3 children. And they all had very bizarre symptoms, but none of the symptoms were the same as each other.
Okay.
So he's describing these 3 cases to my endocrinologist, and my endocrinologist is going, check, check, check. Cat had all these symptoms. I was the
Okay.
key.
All right.
And it
You
turns
were
out
the linear B script.
I was. Never heard it described that way before. But yeah, it turns out we were all taking Asthma 1.
Okay.
The kids were taking a lower dose, which is why they didn't present all the symptoms like I did. So right after lunch, my endocrinologist called me and said, "Hey, do you have any that we could test?" I ran it over in my coffee break because I worked across the street from the hospital, and that's how we discovered it.
Okay. Wow. And then what happened after that? So you learn that you're on this, I mean, I guess the animal equivalent of an incredibly strong hormone, and you're taking massive quantities on a daily basis. You describe these symptoms that you have. You finally figured out what's going on. What happened next?
Well, when we discovered, like, I had developed Cushing syndrome, which is just as sexy as it sounds, from taking that, the equivalent of so many steroids. They had to wean me off, obviously, and that was very tricky. I nearly died. But I went to the herbalist and I'm like, dude, it's your stuff that's making me sick. I thought he would want to know because sometimes I would go in to buy it and it would be sold out. It was very popular. And he didn't care. He just kept selling it, knowing that it was hurting people, knowing he was hurting kids.
This reminds me of when you go back to the 1800s in the United States, and I guess also elsewhere. There were people would hawk from town to town this magical serum, Doctor, I don't know, whoever, Dr. Flanagan's magic serum, but and it contained things like morphine, and like it worked very well in the sense that people would take it, they'd feel no pain, they'd feel fantastic. But of course, that's because they were on an opiate, right? They had like Coca-Cola in its initial formulation, not for many years, but in its initial formulation, Coca-Cola had cocaine in it, and people liked it because
cocaine.
I can't speak from personal experience. But
well, just ask the bear. I don't know if you've seen Cocaine Bear, but that's hilarious.
I've seen the trailer. I think that was enough for me. But I guess these supplements, to tie it back to what you're saying. I mean, you said it worked. It worked great for you. Your asthma basically disappeared, but not through the means that was promised. It wasn't the herbs, whatever else are in those pills.
Yeah. It wasn't something natural. Technically cow gallstones are natural, but you know what? So is arsenic. So
sure.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, it was really upsetting to think that, I fell for the natural fallacy of, it's natural, it'll be better for you, because my doctor had wanted me to go on steroids for my asthma, and I didn't want to go that route. You see the irony.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do a little bit. I want to do 108 a day.
Well, I mean, it's one thing. That's one thing. Except that's not what happened, right? Like this was in the sense of fraud, right?
Yeah, totally.
In the sense that you were promised herbs and you were given the bovine equivalent of prednisone.
Yeah.
And so that's I don't know, fraud, a bait and switch, whatever it was, but you weren't taking what you thought you were taking, and you weren't, what you were being given was not what this herbalist was saying. And when informed that essentially he was selling a fraudulent product, it didn't matter to him.
Not at all. He kept selling it. And so I wanted to sue him. And that is when I found out that herbs and health food weren't regulated in Canada.
So when you say not regulated, so they say that when you have proof that what's in the box is different from what's on the box, it's a caveat emptor, too bad, so sad.
Exactly.
Like there's no recourse because it doesn't. There's no legal recourse.
Yeah, there was no regulation, so there's nothing I could do except maybe sue the federal government.
For
And
insufficient regulation.
exactly. And at the time, I was told I likely wouldn't live to see 30. So I definitely wouldn't live to see that court case come to fruition.
Wow. Is that still the case today?
No.
Okay, so what changed between then and now?
Me.
Okay, well, tell me about that, please.
Well, I was just incensed. I was livid. I thought this was horrible. I was going to make a difference. So I started being a guest lecturer at third and fourth year university pharmacy classes to warn them. And then a Health Canada inspector actually joined, and we would give our talks on the same day. Well, I made best friends with her. And I decided instead of suing the government, I was going to volunteer my time and work with Health Canada to get regulations put in place. So that's how I spent my wild 20s. Instead of bar hopping, I was out writing regulations, and the regulations were put into effect January 1st, 2004.
That's great. Wow. So you changed public policy for the benefit of all Canadians.
That's what I wanted to do. However, an audit was done in 2021 of the Health Canada or the natural health product regulations. Mm-hmm. And one of the outcomes, if I can just read it to you, I'll quote it from their website. It says,
let's be accurate here.
Right?
I appreciate specificity and accuracy. Yeah, please do.
It says, quote, overall, Health Canada's oversight of the natural health products available for sale in Canada fell short of ensuring that products were safe and effective. And there was a whole list of recommendations that they should do, and they have taken them all on board. But to me, that just says that even though the regulations have been in place for 20 years, it's still very much a buyer beware situation.
Right. Okay. So the regulations are in place, but they're not enforced, and there's no.
They try to enforce them. They do try. Mm-hmm. They can do recalls now. They can stop certain products from being sold, but Health Canada actually was unable to pull a product from the market that involved an adverse reaction that ended up with somebody being hospitalized because it had a pharmaceutical ingredient in it. So like a prescription drug, just like the cow gallstones, but they were not able to get that off the shelves. And so that was one of the recommendations where they're like, look, we need to have stricter regulations and enforcement powers to get this sort of thing off the market.
Oh, so it was a case of where the regulations say you're not allowed to do this, but then if someone did it, Health Canada could only wag their finger and had no enforcement mechanisms. Was that essentially what led to that situation?
It's hard to know exactly the details because part of the audit is redacted. But you can read the audit report if you want. It is on the Health Canada website. But there was that notation in there.
Send that to me, Kat, and
I will do that.
We'll put a link to that audit report in the show notes so that anyone who wants to find out directly from Health Canada what the current state, or I guess you said 2021. So what was the current state 3 years ago? You can find out. Sure. Okay, so that's
one of the things I would like to touch on is Vanessa's law was put into place last year.
And all right. Well, I don't know what Vanessa's law is. I'm sure Vanessa was a lovely person, possibly is a lovely person. So please tell me about Vanessa and her law.
Well, I'll tell you about the law because I don't know Vanessa either, but I'm thankful for her. The alt-med crowd had massive pushback on this last July when it came into force. And it basically stipulated that if a healthcare provider sees an adverse reaction from a natural health product, they have to report it. Manufacturers were supposed to be doing this. Oops, sorry about that. For the last 20 years, but they really aren't doing it. So now it's if a doctor, nurse, healthcare practitioner sees an adverse reaction, they have to report it like they would do with any drug.
Right. Well, you mentioned that there's a fairly common drug that reacts badly with grapefruit juice.
Yeah, antihistamines.
Yeah, okay, which again is over the counter. That's not even a prescription drug. Um, why wouldn't healthcare professionals report adverse reactions to, like, under pretty much any circumstances? I don't want to single out the alt med industry. I want that included, of course, but if it's don't mix grapefruit juice with Mountain Dew or whatever, just like two drinks. I want to know about this, and this should be done. I mean, someone had to be the first one to suffer from a bad reaction between antihistamines and grapefruit juice. If there's an alt med product that interacts badly with something else, why wasn't that part of a doctor's responsibilities decades ago? And why would anyone fight against that? I'm trying to understand here. Please help me out here, Kat.
I will do my best, but I am so on your side. When the regulations were put into place, they didn't go nearly as far as I wanted them to go, obviously. Mm-hmm. And they are slowly trying to get stricter with them, but there's so much pushback from the people who line their pockets making this stuff.
Oh, so this is strictly a financial thing. If anyone hears about, I make this supplement, and if anybody reports a bad reaction to it, it might harm my future sales. So I'm going to fight disclosure of this tooth and nail. And that's just like, is it as simple as that?
Well, what they do is they say, they're taking away your choices. They're taking away your options. You won't be able to get what you need to, quote, stay healthy, end quote, if these regulations are put into place.
Oh, so that's their pitch to the public. So they're calling on the public, this wonderful product that I, Leslie Rosenblood, put out to you. And I'm just a humble person trying to help people, and the big bad government is going to take away your right to enjoy the benefits of my generosity by putting this product out, which I sell at a loss, almost, not quite, but almost.
Well, and you've had access to it, so you know that you like it and you know that it works. Don't let them take it away from you. And they're not going to unless it's dangerous.
It sounds like a lollipop for a 3-year-old.
Right? But I can send you some links about some of the pushback I've seen, and I'm on a couple of hate lists, and I'm very proud of that.
So the government was proposing mandatory disclosure of bad effects, and the industry's response was to go not to argue about the government on the merits of disclosure, but to go to the public and say, call your MP, don't let them take your supplements away, even though that's not. From what I understand, and I'm depending on your description here. Mm-hmm. From what I understand, they weren't saying we're going to outlaw these supplements. We're just going to collect information about any bad reactions that might occur, just or like interactions with other drugs.
Just like if you get a vaccine and you get a rash, the pharmacist who gives you the jab or the nurse who gives you the jab needs to report it. That's all they're saying is same thing. If you go and you develop a rash from taking a herb, somebody's got to report that. Or what happened to me is a severe adverse reaction. Mm-hmm. Severe adverse reactions can also be death.
That would be the severest, I would say.
So it's like, if people are dying because of this, then maybe it should be reported.
I've got to ask, please tell me that as part of either Vanessa's laws or the regulations that you helped pass, do they have to accurately list the ingredients in supplements today? Like, do they list cow gallstones in the asthma medication that you took?
They're supposed to.
Okay.
But one of the recommendations in the audit is that they need to strengthen up the packaging and the ingredient descriptions. So I think that it's still not happening. It's been mandated for 20 years, but they're still not doing it.
Okay.
And manufacturers only have to self-attest to the efficacy of anything that they sell.
And if they are found out to have knowingly or unwittingly misled customers, is there any recourse to consumers like you or to the government to in the way of enforcement action?
The government does have some enforcement action. It's not strong enough yet.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully that will change. The audit came out in 2022, so hopefully, later this year we'll start to see stronger regulations in place. But since the vast majority of these products do come from overseas, it's very easy that they can just change their company name, put it out under a different name, and go under the radar again.
Okay. Well, you mentioned at the start, so that's the supplement industry. We've been talking about primarily herbs, but there's you mentioned that there's a lot more to alt med than supplements. So I want to move on to some of these other things. Anything else about what we've talked about so far before we move on?
Well, did you want me to mention what happened in Japan with Benekoji?
Well, I spent a year living in Japan, so I'm always curious about what's going on in that country. Please tell me what Benekoji is, and then what happened in Japan with it.
It is yeast and mold that is grown on rice.
Sounds disgusting. Almost as bad as natto, which the Japanese say is a delicacy, and it's my favorite cuisine overall, but natto is awful. Personal opinion. But okay, so but you know what? If they eat natto, the Japanese considered natto to be a delicacy. They would also appreciate whatever the benefits are of Benekoji.
Well, with Benekoji, and of course, like this, you can cut this if you want, but while I've been preparing a talk that I'm going to give at the Weekend Reason conference, and I had just finished it, and I closed the document, and what's the first thing I see is a news report about Benekoji. I'm like, and this was at the end of March. So what had happened is normally Benekoji, it is used because it creates lovastatin, which is known, like statins are good for your heart, right? Like people go on statins to reduce their blood pressure. And people will take Benekoji because it's cheaper than prescription statin medications.
Okay.
However, if when you're producing Benekoji, something goes awry, you instead get citrulline, which has been linked to liver, kidney, and cell toxicity. And in Japan, they knew something had gone awry. They knew this in late last year, but it wasn't made known to the public until the end of March when they recalled over 40 Benekoji products, including Benekoji supplement and miso crackers and vinegars, because they sometimes use it as a food coloring. So It gets used in different ways. And yet 5 people have died and 114 have been hospitalized so far because of the Benekoji supplement made by this one manufacturing plant in Japan. They know that this supplement was sold to China and Taiwan. They don't know if it was for use in those markets or if it was for sale elsewhere.
All right. So I'm going to ask essentially the same question I asked before. How is that different from an E. coli contamination in lettuce? I think it was a few years ago here. There was a major supplier from California, and like lettuce was contaminated and was sent all the way across North America. Now, I'm assuming that you're not against lettuce. This was terrible. I'm not condoning E. coli and like that. It was a bad thing. People got sick, and I think there were a few deaths, if I recall properly. But it wasn't. That wasn't part of. That wasn't the intention.
Right.
Right. It happened. That's bad. For this Benekoji, the poisoning that happened in Japan, is it the same sort of thing? Like, okay, like someone made a mistake, but it wasn't their intention, and it's a risk, and it happened, and we need to take steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. But is it fair to condemn the industry for the mistake of a single, even a large, but for the mistake of a single company producing and distributing this product?
Well, sort of. And my answer is twofold. First is because when consumerlabs.com last tested Benecoji products in 2022, they found at least 30% contained citrinin. So that's a danger. But
Okay, so it wasn't a one-off. It was.
Wasn't a one-off.
Okay, but that's important, right?
It is, yeah. And second of all, they knew about it at the end of 2023 and didn't do a recall and didn't notify the public until the end of March. Whereas with the salads, you're going to find out within a few days.
Right.
Whereas here, they kept selling the product for 3 months, knowing that something had gone wrong.
Okay, so that's
kind of why I condemn them a little more than the salad people.
Right. Fair enough.
But do wash your salads.
For a whole host of other reasons as well. But yes, okay. All right. So let's talk about, you gave, at the start of this conversation, you talked about a whole host of other aspects that are also considered alternative medicine. So I think we've covered herbs and supplements sufficiently, but there's a whole bunch of other things that are deemed alternative medicine. So I'll leave this to you. Let's pick one and explore that a little bit for us.
Sure. Well, there's homeopathy.
Yeah, that one I have. That one mystifies why. Again, I'm not a scientist, but it kind of mystifies me why anyone thinks that that's a valid treatment for anything. But in case people are not aware, can you briefly tell us what, like, according to someone who is a homeopathy practitioner, how would they describe homeopathy? What is it according to someone that practices it?
Sure. They would say that like cures like. So if you have something that upsets your stomach, you would use that if you have an upset stomach.
So that's the same principle on which vaccines work, isn't it?
Sort of, but with this, they dilute the mother tincture, as they call it. They will take a compound that is supposed to make you violently ill because you're violently ill. And then they dilute it and suspect it, which is tapping for like hundreds of times.
Suspect? Did you?
I'm not swearing on your podcast, I promise.
This is a new term for me. I see. I'm learning a lot from you, Kat. Thank you. Okay, so they dilute it and suspect it.
Yes. So they take the mother tincture and they'll put like a drop or two into another vial that's full of water, and they'll tap on it or suspect on it for hundreds of times. And then they'll take one drop of that, dilute it again, usually 23 times. So
one drop from the original goes into a container from which one drop is taken and put into a container from which one drop is taken and put into a container and so on. So that
only the water that remains has a memory of what the initial product was, and the memory will help cure you.
I asked you to describe it the way a homeopathy practitioner would describe it. Is that how someone who actually believes in homeopathy would describe it? Like, is that accurate?
That's how I've heard it described. Now, they probably didn't giggle like I did, but yes.
Okay, I'll grant that. Okay, so that's wild.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, if water has memory, it's not just going to remember that one little drop of mother tincture that you put in there. It's going to remember like dinosaur poop.
Which is even more
remember everything.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, and basically they're sugar pills.
All right. So I'm going to ask another. I've asked you this before, but in this context, so what's the harm? I mean, too much sugar is bad, but I'm assuming they're not that much. So what's the harm?
The harm is, well, first of all, people are basically being robbed because you're paying for something that's never going to work. But more importantly, people will turn to this instead of going to seek actual medical care. And
Right.
you have had kids, you know, their parents take them off to the homeopathic doctor. They like to say that they're doctors or naturopathic doctors, and they won't get insulin for their diabetes. Instead, they'll get homeopathic medicine, and they wonder why they end up in a coma. So it can have very real consequences when they're trying to treat severe illnesses with sugar pills.
If you're actually sick and you treat it with a placebo, I mean, at that point there's no active ingredient. If you
Right.
try and treat an actual syndrome or condition with a placebo, you're not going to get positive results, and that's
Right.
the real danger. Okay. So that's homeopathy. Let's do one or two more, and then I want to come back to a broad focus for to end things off. But let's go through one or two more alternative medicine practices.
Oh, what would you like to do? Would you like to do like cupping or acupuncture, acupressure, chiropractors?
So let's do acupuncture and what I'm assuming is a close cousin, acupressure.
Yeah, one uses needles, one uses a finger poking you, basically. Like
Oh,
it's basically like a form of massage. Is you have
okay.
acupressure
But
points on your
massage
body.
is good. I mean,
Massage is great.
I've had massages. I've been really sore. Sometimes I've actually been more sore after a massage, but
Hmm.
massage actually helps. Like so if acupuncture and pressure are like a massage, isn't that in the right context a good thing? I mean, a massage isn't going to help my cancer, should I have it,
Exactly.
but
So
it is. I pull a muscle in my back, and a good massage is going to help me recover faster than I would otherwise.
right, if you're going because you have a sore back and you want to be poked and prodded, great, more power to you. There's no real
Does it work
harm.
for that? I don't know.
Acupressure may. There haven't been any really great studies on it. Acupuncture, they like to put little needles everywhere, right? So they'll put needles around your ear to cure, your chronic migraines, which maybe those migraines are being caused because you have a brain tumor that's not been diagnosed. So in that sense, getting little needles in your face or in your ear or in your back, I mean, it may feel good to have blood circulation in that area, but it's not going to cure you of anything. So a massage,
Okay.
hey, I would kill for a massage right now. They they are
Please don't.
awesome. They make you
Please
feel so
don't,
good.
Kat. It's not worth it. Please don't kill anyone.
I'm too pretty to go to jail.
Do not
But
test that hypothesis.
I promise you I won't.
Thank
But
you.
it makes you feel good when you have sore muscles, but it's not
Yes.
going to help your kidney disease. It's not going to increase your adrenal function. It's not going to detox your liver.
All right. So when
You
I get a
know,
massage, right, I don't know any massage practitioner who has claimed that a massage is going to detox my liver. Uh, are those the claims made by acupuncturists?
well, I haven't gone to any, but they do claim to cure things such as, migraines, sinus issues, internal organ problems. So yeah, they do make claims
Okay.
that they are curing things. It's not just, ooh, come, this will make you feel nice. They're
All right.
actually trying to treat disease and ailments, and there's no efficacy shown that I can find anyway. And I've read a lot of scientific journals that prove it to be beneficial, other than momentarily, this makes me feel good.
Right. Okay. And then, so let's move on to chiropractors, because that's also very common.
Mhm.
And I mean, I know lots of people who go see chiropractors, and I know some of them who swear by their chiropractors. They come out of a treatment, they feel better, they worry, if they don't know where they say things like, I don't know where I would be today if it wasn't for my chiropractor. So anecdotally, it's both popular and effective based on what I've heard from people that I know. So, as an adjunct to other medical treatments, do you have any problems with chiropractic as a profession?
The biggest problems I have is when it comes to neck manipulation and especially
Okay.
treatments on babies. That's when, if a grown up wants to go and they want to take that risk, go for it. I've gone to a chiropractor when I was younger. I did a lot of crazy things when I was younger. Uh, and that little massage thing that they have, it kind of is like, cement pounder. It feels so good. But neck manipulation, it can cause a stroke. It can cause a blood clot to go to your brain. So that is a risk that people need to be made aware of. And when you're doing chiropractic treatments on infants whose bones have not yet fully formed and developed, that's a no-go area for me.
And so I guess two questions: is that common? Because this is the first I've heard about chiropractic being practiced on infants. And do we know, have there been studies that have shown that there are negative effects of
Yes.
of chiropractic treatments on babies?
Not just on infants, but on adults as well.
Okay, well let's talk about negative effects on babies first. Like, how common is that, and then let's go on to adults.
To be honest, I haven't looked at the research in many years for the effects on babies, but I do know,
Okay.
your skull hasn't even fully formed until you're at least 4 to 5 months old, right? It's
Oh,
all
I know.
cells. It's all soft
Yeah,
and squishy.
the soft. I've got 4 kids, and that was always like the biggest concern, right? Because the soft spot was like, don't push down on the top of their head; you'll crush their brains.
Right? So if they're that soft and squishy still, I've never had kids, so to me they're always just soft and squishy. You shouldn't be trying to manipulate their spine and their neck and their head.
Right.
Like,
As a parent, I spend those first 6 months ensuring that nothing, they can't lift, they don't have enough strength to lift their own heads up. So you're always cradling them to make sure that that you're not that they're not being twisted in any way. That's
Right.
sort of parenting 101, and chiropractors violate that.
Yeah. You just have to Google a thing and you'll get scared.
Okay, I'm not sure I want to, but
don't.
anyone who's listening that's braver or more curious than I am about this fairly dark topic is welcome to do so. All right, so let's talk about chiropractors and adults. Again, with any medical treatment, it's not risk-free. Okay, that's fine. And you're telling me that there are dangers associated with some chiropractic treatments. I will take your word for that. That's fine. But anytime you have surgery of any kind, it's not risk-free. People die on the operating table all the time, not due to medical malfeasance, although sometimes that happens too, unfortunately, but because there's a bad reaction with the anesthetic, or because there's any number of conceivable complications. And so if you're going to have surgery, you know that there's a chance you're not going to wake up. That's part of, most of the time it's warranted and it's a good thing to do, but there is a risk. So, all right.
And it's a risk you accept, right?
Right. So you're telling me chiropractic is not risk-free. I'll accept that on your word, but is it particularly dangerous? Is how bad is it compared to other standard medical treatments?
I don't think it's especially dangerous. The problem lies in when people use it sort of like in lieu of going for a massage, because, I'm feeling a little tense, like my back's a little sore. So instead of maybe doing yoga, maybe stretching, maybe doing, some relaxation at home, they'll go to their chiropractor more frequently. And the more frequently you go, the more neck manipulations you have, you're increasing your risk for stroke and bad things happening. So that's where I get concerned with it. If people are going and they're enjoying it and they accept the risk, more power to them. They're adults. They can do a thing.
Right. So in an ideal world, what's the appropriate use for chiropractic? for chiropractors? Or is there one in
I
your view?
I don't know that there is one. To me, I would rather go to a physiotherapist
Okay.
and address any underlying concerns that may be going on.
Okay. So I'd like to close off with kind of a conversation about why people flock to alt med treatments, and I think that I alluded to I think what I think is a major driver at the start of this conversation, and that is that there are real problems with our medical system here in Canada, and different ones and even larger ones in our neighbors in the south. And from what I read in the media, the same is true in Britain with their vaunted National Health Service, and in just about every country in the world. So I don't want to seem like I'm picking on one country or another, but like even here in Canada, there are tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people that don't have a family doctor. And the way our system is structured, that is, that without an MD, without a family MD, they are the gatekeepers. If you have a serious condition, if you have chronic migraines, if you suspect you might have cancer, if you think you might have anything that could eventually get to be life-threatening, and you don't have a family doctor, you essentially have no recourse. You can't see a specialist. Right. And so for these tens or possibly hundreds of thousands of Canadians, like what's left to them except to go to alternative treatments that can treat depression, that claim they can treat liver conditions, that say they can treat severe eczema or anything else. So I'd like to know like your thoughts. Like you've been pretty harsh on the alt med industry, and you have your reasons, and you've done a good job explaining them. But I'm trying what I'm trying to do is get your insights on how can we stop pushing people towards these practitioners and industries that you genuinely seem to think is causing so much harm.
There's so much that's broken with the system right now, and I wish I had a magic wand and could fix it. There's also several things that lead people to go down the path of pseudoscience, and that includes alt med. Feeling ostracized, othered, even there's some people out there that are taking a herbal Ozempic because they can't get Ozempic necessarily. Now, maybe they want it for weight loss. Maybe they need it for their diabetes. But the herbal version, it's a alkaloid from golden seal called berberine, and it basically has very low absorption in your intestines, and you're paying for a placebo. So if you're taking it hoping for weight loss and you don't get weight loss, you'll be disappointed. If you're taking it because you need a supplement for your diabetes, you could have really serious consequences, right? So there's lots of reasons that we have to let people know that there are dangers out there and find a way to fix the healthcare system, unlike the UCP government in Alberta, and don't push people to it. Because right now, it's not safe. It's not proven to be effective. In many cases, it's proven to be harmful, or there are all kinds of interactions out there that could happen that could be harmful. Like you could have an adverse reaction because of an interaction. And right now, they don't have that patient packaging that says, hey, by the way, don't take this if you're also taking a statin, or don't take this if you're also taking antidepressants because it could lead to a coma. So until we have that support for consumers, we have to deal with the bigger issue, which is our healthcare system as a whole.
The last time I got a prescription and I got the actual pills, there was an insert that was like almost 3 pages of tiny type informing me of all of the terrible things that could happen if I took the pill. And I kind of stopped after half a page. It was like my doc prescribed it. I need it. I've got this dose, but it was terrifying to read that. So you're saying we should have these horror scripts in alt med treatments as well?
Absolutely.
And would people read them? I don't know how many people are going to actually read these. What's in the current ones either.
I read them.
Oh, okay. Good for you.
All right. I want to know. Well, because I do take several medications to keep me on this side of the grass now, right? I have to be very aware of, could this affect me in a negative way? Even if it's just something simple like a different painkiller or an antihistamine for my allergies, I have to know that I'm not setting myself up for something dangerous. And a lot of people, especially when we don't feel good, we don't want to be reading all that tiny print. So what's in the package should be as safe as possible.
Yeah, I think that is a sentiment that we can all get behind. Kat, I've got like a dozen more questions that I want to ask you, but I also realize that we probably could talk for 3 days and probably don't want to. But if, like me, some of our listeners want to hear more from you, what are their options to find you and hear more from you?
Well, you can find me on TikTok or Instagram at Kitty Corner Skeptic. I will be speaking at the We Can Reason conference in Calgary on Star Wars Day, which is May the 4th. And and you can also hear me give regular updates about herbal information on the Skeptic Zone podcast. So I'm out there. I'm always beating the shrubbery and making sure that people are aware that they're making informed decisions.
All right. Well, Kat Mack, this has been great. Thank you for speaking with me today on Podcast for Inquiry.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please show your support at patreon.com/podcastforinquiry and give us a 5-star review. Email us at podcast@centerforinquiry.ca. We'd love to hear your perspective. The Podcast for Inquiry is brought to you by the Centre for Inquiry Canada, a national educational charity supporting reason, compassion, and secular values. Help us support rational discourse and evidence-based decision-making by becoming a member at centerforinquiry.ca/join. CFIC is on the web, centerforinquiry.ca. We are on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter or X at CFI Canada. Podcast for Inquiry is produced and edited by Zach Dumont and Martin Zielinski. Music by Anthony Lazzaro. I'm your host, Leslie Rosenblood. See you next time.